There's a moment in The Wicker Man that has haunted Britt Ekland for over 50 years, and not because of anything supernatural. It's a scene that was meant to titillate, to shock, and to reinforce the eerie allure of pagan Summer Isle. But for Ekland, it became a personal betrayal. A promise was broken, a body double was slipped in, and to this day, she still won't sign photos from that moment. But let's rewind and explore how this iconic horror film, often called the Citizen Kane of the genre, spiraled into one of the most misunderstood, mishandled, and mythologized productions in British cinema history. The Wicker Man, released in 1973, is a film unlike any other horror movie of its time. No blood-splattered scream queens or axe-wielding maniacs here. Instead, it offered a sun-drenched nightmare draped in folk tunes, maypoles, and fertility rituals. At its core, it was about belief, what we believe, why we believe it, and what happens when those beliefs collide. Directed by Robin Hardy and written by Anthony Shaffer, the film stars Edward Woodward as Sergeant Neil Howie, a devout Christian sent to the remote Scottish island of Summer Isle to investigate the disappearance of a young girl named Rowan Morrison. But instead of finding clues, he finds contradiction. The townsfolk deny Rowan ever existed, the children learn about phallic symbolism in school, and frogs are shoved into mouths as folk cures. Something is clearly rotten in this Eden. Howie, played with increasing desperation by Woodward, represents law, order, and religious conviction. But he's walking into a spiritual ambush. The Islanders, led by the silky-voiced Lord Summerisle, played with sinister charm by Christopher Lee, worship ancient Celtic gods and embrace sensuality as a natural part of life. The island isn't just off the grid, it's off the moral compass entirely. For Christopher Lee, this wasn't just another horror gig. He'd made a name for himself in Hammer horror films, most notably as Dracula. But The Wicker Man was something different. Intelligent, haunting, and deeply literate. Lee considered it the best film he ever made and the best performance he ever gave. So much so that he worked without pay and even bankrolled his own US press tour, popping up on obscure Iowa morning shows just to spread the word. Meanwhile, the film was made on a shoestring budget during a crisis in the British film industry. British Lion Films had been bought out, and the new ownership needed to prove they were serious about producing content. The result? A frantic shoot in late autumn that had to pretend it was spring. That's right, those blossoming trees. Totally fake. They glued leaves to bare branches and trucked in handmade apple trees to simulate a harvest season that simply didn't exist. The actors, often freezing, sucked on ice cubes between takes to prevent their breath from showing on camera. It was low-budget magic, and it worked. But it wasn't all magic behind the scenes. Let's get to that infamous nude scene. Britt Ekland played Willow McGregor, the landlord's sultry daughter who tries to seduce Howie through the bedroom wall in one of the most talked about sequences in horror history. It's sensual, strange, and symbolic, but also the source of the film's most controversial betrayal. Ekland, who was pregnant during filming, agreed to shoot nude only from the waist up. That was her boundary. But after she left the set, the producers secretly hired a body double, either a Glasgow stripper or an exotic dancer, depending on who you ask, to shoot full-body rear shots of Willow's hypnotic dance. They slapped a blonde wig on the double, filmed the scene, and edited it seamlessly into the movie. Ekland didn't find out until the film was released. She was, in her words, devastated. She felt duped, betrayed, and forever distanced herself from the film. To this day, she refuses to sign stills from that scene because, as she tells fans, "That's not me." Adding insult to injury, her dialogue was also dubbed, without her permission, by jazz singer Annie Ross, because the producers didn't like her Scottish accent. Ekland later joked that the body double had the ugliest, biggest bottom in the world. and lamented not doing the scene herself, saying hers was much smaller and much nicer. Ekland's then boyfriend reportedly tried to block the film's release altogether, furious over the nude scene, even though it technically wasn't her on screen. But let's zoom out from the drama and talk about why that scene and the movie itself still resonates. Anthony Shaffer, the screenwriter, wanted to create a horror film with no gore, no monsters, and no cliches. His central question was, what makes a perfect sacrifice? From that idea sprang the chilling climax of the film. Howie isn't the hero, he's the sacrifice. Chosen not because he's evil, but because he's pure. He's a virgin, a Christian, a fool who walked into a pagan trap. And that final scene, Howie praying as he's sealed inside, a massive wicker effigy and set aflame, was shot for real. The Wicker Man itself was a 40-foot tall structure built on the cliff tops of Burrowhead. Woodward, terrified and brilliant, insisted on seeing the effigy for the first time in character. His stunned reaction was genuine. He later said he was never more scared in his entire career. To make things worse, a goat penned above him urinated on him during the shoot. Talk about suffering for your art. But perhaps the biggest tragedy surrounding The Wicker Man has nothing to do with goats or butt doubles. It's the fate of the film itself. The original full-length negative, 99 minutes of director Robin Hardy's vision, was lost, not misfiled, not accidentally burned. According to a persistent and disturbing rumor, it was deliberately destroyed and used as landfill in the construction of the M3 motorway in England. Even Christopher Lee believed it, blaming British Lion executive Michael Dealey, who reportedly loathed the film and told Lee it was one of the 10 worst movies he'd ever seen. Dealey denies this. Lee never forgave him. What survives today is a patchwork of versions. The 87-minute theatrical cut, a 95-minute director's cut, and the 91-minute final cut from 2013. It was initially released as the B-movie to Don't Look Now. It had no marketing, no fanfare, but it built a cult following, one VHS copy at a time. Critics eventually called it a masterpiece. Christopher Lee called it the best British horror film ever made. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about Britt Ekland's situation? Was the use of a body double without her full consent justified by the era? Or is it an unforgivable breach of trust? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.